smelling strange.
Hello and welcome to the Season 1 finale of Teachers on Teachers, the show where we take your favorite teachers and get to know them a little better. I'm your host, Seamus Burke, and today we're brought to you by Mr. Lavoie and Mr. Webb. For those that don't know you guys, may you introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Mr. Lavoie. I teach U.S. history and a few electives here or there as the district allows. I have been teaching here in Saugus for 24 years. I graduated from Saugus High School in 1995, and I live in town as well.
And my name is Ken Webb. I'm a instructional technology teacher here at the school, teaching video editing, desktop publishing, yearbook class, photography, things of that area. It changes a little here and there, but for the most part, that's it. I've been teaching here in the district 24 years as well. 1 year prior at Hamilton Wenham, and then a short little stint in Framingham. So that's it.
Okay, what are some of your guys' hobbies outside of school?
I guess that's a broad subject. I've kind of created quite a few. Some deviate from my former career, doing landscaping, hardscapes, ponds, that kind of thing, as well as I like to do a lot of hunting. I coincides with kind of where I live, which is in Maine. I've also, in the last year, started milling wood with a portable bandsaw mill. Like to do anything outdoors, really.
I think that some of the kids who watch would know that I like to travel. Having just got back from Europe with students and taking students again next year. I'm going to Thailand this summer. But in the midst of the pandemic, I bought a smoker. And so I think probably my favorite hobby is trying to smoke different cuts of meat, using different rub flavors and things like that, making sure that everybody's well fed if they're nearby.
Sounds delicious.
Do you think your teaching style and experience has evolved over time?
I think our styles have to have had evolution for nearly a quarter of a century. I'm very much a traditionalist as far as how I was trained to teach is kind of how I teach still. When I first came to Saugus High School, I was one of the first people to use like PowerPoint and a smart board and things like that. I've always tried to infuse whatever the newest technologies are, but I still am who I was in many ways 20 years ago, where tests and quizzes look probably similar, except they're on the computer now. My instruction is pretty much the same, I think.
Yeah, I think I guess I would initially I started off only teaching business education courses, and I find what I'm doing now a little more instructional technology, where you're teaching software and how to use equipment. Definitely has kind of evolved, which it's evolved partially because I enjoy this way of teaching more. I like to do more than to actually talk, but I've been told I talk too much from my students. So
we're all guilty of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of comes with the business, shall you say? It's part of what you do is you're talking to people all day long, and we tend to be a little long-winded sometimes.
I got to say that I think when talking about being the instructional technology teacher and using that, a bunch of the kids are probably surprised to hear that for 2 years or 3 years early on in the career, I taught video production in a TV studio with pneumatic tapes and no computers, and it was a chore and a challenge, and a very, very outdated studio when we were there. I was happy to see everything get digitized and move over towards you so we could do more relevant things.
Yeah. I feel like it's always constantly changing.
Always.
And now we have, our own little studio here. In many ways, it's very similar, but again, the technology's so much different. I mean, used to have a person on each camera, and now it's robotically controlled. So there's kind of eliminates some of those teaching opportunities, to be quite honest. In many ways, I almost wish we still had to use those cameras and have people go through that process. You get a little different perspective
I
on
can
things.
search my records. I probably still have my quiz on camera parts. So.
I probably wouldn't do so well on that either. Yeah, we actually, I mean, we're talking about similar things and how we have crossover. There's a lot of crossover if we start to, the longer we have conversations, the more things we find that we've had in common. We were hired, I mean, I'm significantly older than Mr. Lavoie, but I started teaching a little bit later, and we got hired the same year to teach here at Saugus. So we've been working here the same number of years. Parking spots are right next to each other because of that, I believe. But there's other commonalities between both of us graduated from Saugus High School. Both of us teaching in Saugus High School. I didn't start off living in Maine, but we both have somewhat of a residence in Maine, me so a little bit more, but enjoy spending time in that
Definitely.
place. So there's a lot more. The studio thing, where he was doing the video production thing. So we have a lot of things. The lack of ability to be able to control the audio within this room, although you can in the other room, which makes no sense. Anyway. Yeah. What else we got?
So, as prominently freshman teachers, do you feel as if you have a hand in helping shape who kids are going to be?
I'll start, because I think I have a little bit more experience teaching mostly ninth graders than Mr. Webb does. And on the one hand, any teacher who spends 180 days with a core group of kids is going to have an influence on them, and you hope it's a positive one. You hope you inspire them to do something or think differently about something. But ninth graders are so new to the high school mentality that really I think my role outside of the history component is just keeping them afloat. And this hasn't changed. It's not a post-COVID thing. They come in and they're wide-eyed. Most of them, they are going through growth spurts. They are getting first jobs. There are so many things happening out in the regular world that to be a consistent presence is grounding. It's not really changing. I think the change for most ninth graders happens sophomore into junior year and then beyond after that. So
I mean, up until the last few years, I never really used to have too many freshmen in my classes. It was more sophomores, juniors, and seniors. Over the last few years, that's changed significantly. It's kind of flip-flopped. So I would say I've had to adjust to a little bit different teaching style for that reason. For the reasons you mentioned, where they're coming into a different learning environment and making that adjustment, admittedly difficult for myself as well. I used to think of my classes as kind of like a junior college. I'm able to kind of treat the kids a little bit differently because more of the responsibility is on them to do the work and get the work done, whereas freshmen are still in that transitional phase of learning how to go about doing that, learning how to do their own studying and being a little more self-sufficient and that kind of thing. I mean, it's just a little bit of a change, but it's all good. I don't know as shaping them will be. I think by default, because I'm in that position of now dealing with freshmen, I think we're all kind of responsible for helping to provide an environment in which they'll be able to better meet their expectations as they kind of grow through.
And I think for me, a tell of it is the other colleagues that we have when it comes to writing college recommendations. Very rarely does someone come to me, because I had them when they were 14. But every once in a while, a student does. And that's when you know that you have actually impacted somebody and changed their life a little bit, because they're coming all the way back to freshman year.
Right.
In a way to say thank you by requesting
Right.
that letter of recommendation. So it does happen, but it's definitely not what I would consider to be like the focal point of what I do. It's more
Yeah.
get them in and out to the next year and let them grow from there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess when we just had that experience in my room right before we came in here where a kid came in to me looking for advice on should I take this other class that you offer, and talking through why it would be good or bad or what, the consequences to that might be. And I don't know if that goes to shaping, but you just get to know students, and then they know that they can actually talk to you and get information about what it is that they should be doing moving forward. So I guess by default, I think you don't have an option to kind of form some of them, but it's a small piece of the puzzle, I'd say, for sure.
And I mean, I think you may do it more so with the club, but like when I take students to Europe, those kids, a lot of them I'm changing.
Major bonding.
And for the kids that you work with on the day-to-day doing
Yeah.
video production stuff, that's where
Yeah.
the life-changing thing is happening, for me at least more frequently. So
Yeah, and I do find that it depends on each individual student's willingness to kind of embrace what's going on in your classroom and develop that relationship further, which is something I try to work on with my classes. I have a little bit more freedom with that in my curriculum. If I can build that bonding experience with that student, then they're more willing to kind of come back and ask questions and talk about what's going on with them. And then that affords you the ability to be able to kind of help guide them through a variety of different experiences they might be having, and again, that's really dependent upon students' abilities to be able to open up and share with you as well.
As these new generations of kids are coming in, how do you find each generation changing from the last?
That's a tough question. I mean, I feel like it's always evolved, slowly, but evolved. But I would say much more quickly in the last 2 or 3 years. I don't know if evolve is the correct term for it, because so many ways it feels like I'm stepping backwards. But I also have to reflect on, it's not only that, it's now that I'm dealing with freshmen, and that isn't something I was used to. But with everything that's gone on, it seems to have been pretty difficult for incoming freshmen to make that adjustment to being a little more responsible for their own work, actions, all of those things.
yeah, I agree 100%. I think that there's been a regression in being prepared for class, in how we treat our peers as students, and time management skills. Like the crux of teaching mostly ninth graders hasn't really changed too much. There's always going to be a maturity shift that you see a chunk of the students go throughout the school year, but I have given out way too many pencils this year compared to in years past. I have had to remind kids to not touch each other, like poke and prod each other, more so this year and last year than really ever before. So the social dynamic has devolved and not evolved. And then like the student role has regressed. I don't know if that's pandemic related. I think it is, but it could just be a natural ebb and flow of more prepared and less prepared students. Certainly there's been groups in the past that have been less mature and not prepared for school as much as they should be. So I think we're rapidly trying to change how we treat students in school, and society has rapidly changed how young people are kind of expected to do things, or what's granted to them at home as well. So there's a clash going on there too. But
yeah, kind of reflective of what's going on with society as well.
I think so.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Do you feel as if you need to put on a mask when you come into school, or are you the same person inside and out?
So I'll say right now that like 85% of what I do in my classroom is an act, but it's an act that's based off of who I am. I try to tell jokes and make light of things and have people like laugh and smile in my regular life, but my jokes here are catered towards school. Like I tell puns, I know they're puns, I know that they're not funny. I tell them to see if I can get a reaction out of some kids. That's all I like. I tell them for that reason. I'm selfish that way, but I am pretty happy-go-lucky in my regular life. I'm pretty happy-go-lucky here. I just recently heard some kids say that I have a reputation of being somewhat scary because if I raise my voice and I get intense for classroom's sake, well, that's an act. Like I can turn that on and off on the turn of a dime. I don't yell at people in my regular life at all. So yeah, I mean, I was in the drama club when I was here. So
I yell at people every day.
Yeah.
In my personal life.
You know what I mean, Dan. You know it'll not end well for you. Now get out of my room!
No, I mean, I would say, see, that is a direct reflection of kind of how I am. I tell myself each year I'm going to start off being a little more professional. I don't know. And try to be a little more straight line with kids. But the reality of it is, like, I don't feel like I can make a connection with that dry personality. And oftentimes I find that kids say the same thing about me, that can be a scary person. I think I have a certain look apparently that is standoffish or whatever. But once kids get in my classroom and see my sarcasm, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And it's trying to find that fine line where you can joke around a little bit with kids to try and get them to kind of respond to what you're doing and want them to kind of interact with you. And there's a fine line, because at a certain point, you have to expect that they're also going to come back with some of that sarcasm, and it may not come at a time when you're looking to be open to that. And so it gets to be a little dance of, where do you draw that line? And it can be difficult, I find. So there's a little bit of a mask, but for the most part, it's difficult for me anyway to kind of not end up being the person that I am outside the building and in the building.
Yeah, I think the kids who think maybe we're intimidating or scary are probably just used to us being ourselves in the classroom.
Yeah.
And so when we have to turn that on and put that intensity in front of them, it's so far from what they're used to that scares people.
Yeah.
And when we turn it off and we're just doing the regular class routine, everything's back to what they expect, and that's not scary. So.
Yeah.
What effect do you think social media and media in general has had on kids today?
Net positive. No. I kid. Hopefully there will be enough students who sign up. But I wrote a course proposal for next year for a digital media course where we'll be able to investigate it a little bit and kind of take some stats and go through some data to see what kids think. But I don't know if it's the social media apps, but it's having the devices in front of them that have really, in my mind, destroyed public education in a way that is almost insurmountable right now without changes. If every teacher had gotten the cell phone pouches at the beginning of the year and we had set up a parameter where everybody was going to put them in,
consistency,
then we might have had some success this year in breaking that down. But having $1,000 piece of equipment in your pocket and a $300 piece of equipment in your ear, I as a teacher don't want to take any of that stuff from people. That's a lot of money. If something happens, I don't want to be responsible for it. But you cannot learn effectively if you're constantly looking at your watch to see what your snap face said, or listen to music while somebody's trying to explain a complex topic to you. So I think it's the devices more so than the social media apps. Bullying always existed. It always will, sadly. Distractions at home will always exist for kids. Social media is probably a quicker access point to it all, and kids don't know how to turn it off yet, which is something they learn as they grow. But I think it's really just the access to the technology that's hurt education more than the apps themselves.
I have a tough time with that question a little bit, because I'm teaching instructional technology and how to create videos, and but I feel strongly that social media is playing a very huge negative role in the development of kids, especially. Adults have a tough enough time
Yeah, absolutely.
functioning. I mean, that's how they parent. That's that is a very broad statement. But a lot of parenting goes on by supplying social media to children at a very young age, just as a diversion. And I mean, I think it's a problem not just in education but socially. Like, one of the mind-blowing I don't watch a lot of movies, but I watched a movie that I was like, that is dead on social dilemma, where they just went through the whole process of, and you're talking to the CEOs or former CEOs of these companies that created these products, and they're saying that they wouldn't let their children use those products until they were about 16 years old, and the effects that they have and how they work. And I would say that every person should watch the movie just so that you're aware of, what it is. Self-admittedly, I will look at social media, but I don't post very many, if any, things on social media anymore. It's baffling to me that I would say 95% of the student body uses social media, will post on social media, but will come into my video editing class and not want to take a single video of themselves doing anything, whether it's just a brief 10-second intro or whatever.
Right.
It's baffling to me that you'll throw yourself out there to millions of people, but not to one person who's grading you. Like, but there's no other person that's going to be seeing these videos, but doesn't make any sense to me. You want to see a kid hop, skip, and freak out about something, tell them to bring up their iCloud account on their computer so they can download a video they took, and they will go into panic trying to cover the screen so you don't see what it is that might be on their phone, which normally is just nothing. It's a picture of them with their friend or whatever. But social media definitely hasn't played a huge positive role in people's lives. I get it. Like, when you get down to seeing family you can't see, and updates on friends and families and things like that, it's great.
Right.
But there's too much chatter on there, and comment. If it was just pictures,
if you could just take the positive, it'd be amazing.
It would be.
The negative is like a tidal wave.
Yeah. In so many ways.
Yeah.
But I'd have to say a big negative for me, but that's just my opinion.
Okay, we're going to shift topics to a little bit less serious now.
Oh, that was serious.
What is your favorite lunch to bring to school?
I mean, favorite lunch versus lunch. Like, I'm not gonna bring my favorite lunch here, but I should. But I try to eat healthy. So for 90% of the year, I brought in yogurt, some fresh fruit, and some granola, like a Diet Coke. So that has the plurality. I also brought some salads in. I'd much rather bring in like Five Guys every day or a steak bomb, but I'd have to say yogurt, fruit, and granola.
I literally have one of the most boring lunches on a daily basis. And I don't know if this question was geared towards like school lunch, but I've never had a school lunch, so I can't really speak to that.
No, like what lunch you bring in to school?
Wow, this is pathetic, but saying it out loud is almost shameful. I literally have like a small wrap with 4 pieces of salami on it, rolled up, and a banana and 18 pretzels, little mini pretzels. Yes, I do count them. Pathetic, but that's my method. Although I will say, now you said favorite, so my favorite would have to be like if my wife makes chili and I get to bring in leftover chili. So I'm not a big leftovers person, but I do love something like chili. Or she makes a zucchini stew that's spicy with, sausage and ground meat in, and
Sounds good.
it's good. But the chili thing I'd say is my favorite.
If a zombie apocalypse suddenly began tomorrow, what would you do?
And tomorrow is, last day of finals, so once the exams were done, I posted my grades. I would head up. We talked about Maine earlier. I'm bound to inherit 40 acres in a small place called Wittipitlock. There's a stream that runs through it. There's all sorts of wildlife. It would be not far from where I think Mr. Webb would probably end up, so I could see a survivalist compound emerge in that area of Maine anyways. But yeah, I'm pretty much ready to go.
And where is that?
Near Reed's Plantation, near Danforth.
Yep.
So.
If I believed that there was ever such a thing as a zombie apocalypse, I'd probably just be going home if I didn't believe. But anyway, yeah, I definitely piggyback off my my son. He just actually moved up there last weekend, 50 acres up in northern Maine. And I'd probably cut out a piece somewhere up there and escape.
It's another one of the parallels that we have. His son moved roughly to the same place where my mother grew up.
Right.
So.
Right, and with that again, just in conversations, what'd you do this weekend? I went up to my son's land, and he's like, I know exactly where it is. I'm like, how is that possible? It's like not even a town. It's called Carey Plantation, and it's literally, on the New Brunswick border.
Yep.
His mother grew up there, or next town over, or next. Yeah, that's a town.
I think it's next town.
Yeah.
Hodgson's a town.
Yeah. He's actually working in Hodgson.
Is he?
Yep. Small world.
Yep, for sure.
Okay, for our final question, what is the dumbest thing you guys did as kids?
I mean, I was a dumb kid. I did a lot of dumb things. One of my favorite dumb stories to relay to students, I haven't told the story in a long time, but I was probably 6 or 7. It was 4th of July. The family had rented a house on a lake in New Hampshire, and there was some fireworks. And they let my older brother set some off. A couple of the neighborhood kids that had gone up that are his age, your age, they let them set them off, and they wouldn't let me set them off. I was too young, and so I was really upset. The next day I went and I found what was called the jumping jack. It was a little firecracker. It would spin around.
Colors.
I found one that had not ignited on the ground. I was like, oh, I got it. This is perfect. So I went inside to the house, and there was a stove and a tiny little bit of wick. I thought I could light on the stove, but it was an electric stove. It wasn't even flame. So I turned on the burner, and I waited for the coil to turn orange, and I put the wick down, and once it sparked, I turned, and I ran as fast as I could to the door to get outside. The door was closed, and that jumping jack went off in my hand and skidded all around the living room, and I was crying and screaming, and my mom came in and yelled at me, and after she knew it was all right. But that was pretty dumb. So.
It's funny. My instinct, as soon as you asked the question, also related to trying to think about how it even happened. I must have tried to forget it over the years, but I had same kind of thing. Firework go off in my hand, which was numbing to my hand, and I was fearful that I had blown off a finger or something like that. But probably the dumbest thing, I don't know, statute of limitations. My cousin, my brother, and I, up in Maine, in the middle of nowhere, came across a logging skidder, and the keys were in it. And we took it for a ride. It just wasn't a smart thing to do. It just wasn't smart. So, yeah, I'd say that was probably the dumbest thing I'd ever done.
So, explosives and Grand Theft Larceny.
Okay, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Teachers on Teachers. Thank you for joining us, and before we go, is there anything our guests would like to say?
Just thank you for having me. Didn't realize we were the season finale. Ratings sweep this week. I can't wait to see what next season has in store.
Yeah, no, I appreciate Seamus and everybody in the class helping out all of this, because this is why I like doing my job, is when I actually have students that want to do this and take the initiative to plan and do this throughout the class. So I guess a thank you to Seamus and the rest of the class as well.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
All right, that's it for this season. We'll be back in the fall with more episodes. See you next time.
obviously you know how it works. I'll introduce
Do I?
it.
Hold on 1 second. We're pulling the script up.
Oh, it's a script. I didn't even read my lines yet.
Oh, Mr. Webb, just to let you know, I put your flash drive on your desk, like in front of your keyboard.
Thank you.
I'll have your other one back tomorrow.
I've
The thing is still rendering, okay?
heard that before. Of course it did, Kendall.